Mr. Jones, you ready to roll? Or are you ready to go?
Thurman's here.
He's presenting a bill with me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then I'll go. Or whichever.
He's presenting two bills with me. So you're okay to wait, Mr. Thurman? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to present AB 2171. I'd like to open in saying that I've got two bills I'll be bringing to committee, hopefully working with the Coastal Commission and streamlining some of their decision-making processes. And I want to just clarify that these bills are not in reaction to the recent media that the Coastal Commission has found themselves into. I've been working on these long before that happened. But hopefully with these ideas that would help the Coastal Commission and regional areas of the state overcome some of those challenges. AB 2171 is designed to reduce the costs associated with local land use decisions concerning land located with the California Coastal Zone. The California Coastal Zone encompasses approximately 840 miles of California coastline and about 287 miles of shoreline around 9 offshore islands. It extends 3 miles into the ocean, bound by the state's seaward boundary of jurisdiction. The inland boundary of the coastal zone can vary as it is measured from the mean high tide line that ranges from a few hundred feet in urban areas up to 5 miles in rural areas. In California, 15 counties and 61 cities are located in whole or in part of the coastal zone. AB 2171 does two things relative to local land use decisions concerning land located within the California coastal zone. First, AB 2171 creates an option for any aggrieved person to either appeal a local land use decision directly to the local superior court or to the California Coastal Commission. Currently, all appealable decisions must be made directly to the Coastal Commission, and only after exhausting all administrative remedies through the Commission can an appellant seek judicial review. Obviously, this costs a significant amount of money and time. AB 2171 allows an appellant at his or her discretion to reduce the time and money needed to reach a final decision by making the appeal directly to the local superior court. Second, AB 2171 narrows the scope of who can appeal a local land use decision. Currently, any aggrieved person can appeal. As defined, any person who appears at a public hearing in person or through a representative, or who appears by any appropriate means, such as a letter or email, prior to the hearing informing either the Coastal Commission or the local entities involved in the nature of his or her concerns, qualifies. So theoretically, any person in the world can become an aggrieved person merely by sending a letter or email of concern to the Coastal Commission. And once so qualified, that aggrieved person can obtrude in local affairs by appealing the local decision to the Commission. I believe that this provision of law is based on two faulty assumptions. First, that the California coast belongs to everyone. I've had people in my office make that very same assertion. And second, that the people who live along the coast care less about preserving its beauty and access than do people who live elsewhere. Both are simply not true. The notion that the California coast belongs to everyone is quite outrageous and nonsensical. The California coast doesn't belong to Mexico or to Canada, and it doesn't belong to Oregon or Washington, and yet certainly doesn't belong to individuals living on the other side of the world. It does, however, belong to all of Californians. Yet under current law, anyone and any entity anywhere in the world can qualify as an aggrieved person. All it takes is a letter or email sent to the right person, and by so qualifying, the person or organization can infringe on the decision-making process of local governments through the appeal process. Now, admittedly, there are certainly portions of the coast that are owned by the public through the various local, state, and federal government entities. But the public does not own any of the private property that is within the coastal zone. Yet operations and policies of the Coastal Commission in many aspects belie that fact. AB 2171 is designed to place reasonable limits on those who can qualify as an aggrieved person. Only persons living or owning property within 1,000 feet of the land subject to the land use decision would be eligible to qualify. That could include persons living or owning property in Mexico and Oregon, but only if they live or own property within 1,000 feet of the property affected by the local use decision. The second assumption that people who live somewhere other than along the coast have a superior sense of protection and aesthetics than those who live, work, and pay taxes within the coastal zone is likewise ludicrous. Current law promotes this fallacy, and AB 2171 is designed and intended to correct that. Under the provisions of AB 2171, local decisions will be honored and free from outsider meddling, and the local sensibilities and standards would be more likely to prevail. Let's allow the locals, wherever they are on the California coast, to protect their own coastline within the parameters of the State Coastal Act as they see fit. And I do want to underline that last point, that I am not looking to reform the State Coastal Act, just the State Coastal Commission and how it plays out that act. And I ask for your aye vote on 2171.
Witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition?
Good afternoon, Chair Williams, members of the committee. Amy Traynor with the California Coastal Protection Network. I'm here to offer our respectful opposition to this bill. I think on a number of reasons. One, we think it's actually goes against some of the points that the Assembly member made. The Coastal Commission has a process where it actually vets the appeals that are filed. So of all of the local land use decisions, there's maybe say 1,000 of them, maybe 100 of them actually get appealed. The Coastal Commission, which are actually the experts, both their staff in particular and the commissioners, on the Coastal Act and its Chapter 3 protection policies, then review those 100 appeals that are filed, and maybe 40 to 50 of them or so actually pass that substantial issue test and make it to a full hearing. So if we're talking about being sort of wise with our judicial resources and not allowing a lot of appeals to go around the body that is charged with protection of our coast, it makes the most sense to retain jurisdiction in the Coastal Commission and not have those appeals circumvent or bypass. The Commission is charged with a very important regulatory job to protect our public access and our coastal resources. And I think it would be troubling to turn over this law into the hands of courts rather than the agency that has been charged for 40 years with being experts on its implementation. So the Coastal Commission and its staff are trustees. They have the expertise, and they are the best body to evaluate those appeals at the initial level. And then the appropriate time to file an appeal with the Superior Court is after the Coastal Commission has vetted those appeals and not before. So we would respectfully ask for your no vote. Thank you.
Other witnesses in opposition?
Eddie Moreno on behalf of Sierra Club California in opposition.
Questions from the committee? Mr. Stone.
Mr. Jones, with all due respect, I think every aspect of this bill just shows a profound lack of understanding of the initiative that was put in place by the voters of California in the 70s and the Coastal Act itself, all the processes and procedures that it stands for. I think you're incorrect that this does anything to the Commission itself, but actually does significantly change the Coastal Act and how it functions and all of the efficiencies that are there, all of the significant interplay that's there. And yeah, the coast does belong to everyone. It is a significant state resource, global resource. It's one of the largest drivers of the economy in the state of California. And as a commissioner for the over 3 years that I was there, I don't remember people weighing in from around the world, but of course they would have been welcome. It's one of the few agencies that does welcome public comment and encourages everyone who wants to come before them to have a say. Because we are and should be very, very proud of the public resource that the coast of California does represent. So I'm not sure quite where this comes from, but it's just a complete misinterpretation and misunderstanding of what the Coastal Act represents and the will of the people of the state of California.
Thank you.
There is a motion. I will just note that I feel like, well, when I have crazy ideas, my staff immediately ask me the same question over and over again. What is the problem that your idea or this legislation seeks to solve? And from your comments, it would be that you don't feel like people from outside of California should be able to make an appeal, but I don't know how many people from outside of California make an appeal every year. That would be useful information. There's typically only about 41 appeals heard, 40, 50 appeals heard a year. I wonder if there's a rash of feared Oregonians and feared Mexicans making appeals to the Coastal Commission. My guess is there's probably not. I do think it's a significant policy change if you would not allow people who are from inland counties that recreate on the coast to make an appeal, and that's really my principal problem with your proposal. I do believe that the coast belongs to all Californians, and look, you don't get much more territorial than a surfer who grew up on the coast. I can be very territorial, but at the end of the day, the coastline at my home does belong to other people too. Carpinteria is one of the most loved vacation spots, and guess what? They don't come from my county, but they deserve to have a voice when the resources of the coast are under threat. And so I would agree with my colleague that this would not be in step with the spirit of the Coastal Act, and the chair's recommendation is no. There was a motion. Is there a second? Second. There is a second. Any other comments, questions from the committee? You may close.
Thank you, sir, Chairman and Mr. Stone. And I appreciate your comments. And I don't necessarily disagree with, let me start with what I do agree with. I do agree that the coastal area and the recreation areas on the coast do belong to all of Californians. The challenge with this particular bill and bringing it to you is we were working with Ledge Council on getting the language exactly where we wanted it to be. So this was an exercise in working with their office and our office and coming up with something that we felt was presentable to the committee. So as I opened, we have two bills this year that we're presenting. The language on the next one hopefully will be fleshed out a lot better with a deeper understanding of the Coastal Act and supportable. The goal here and the foundation of my idea here is that with 15 counties being on the coast, Mr. Harper represents a county, I represent a county, Mr. Stone, you represent a county, Mr. Hadley represents a county, Mr. Williams, you represent a county. I come from local government, and I believe that local control leads to the best policies, and I think in this case the best environmental protections as well. When you've got situations in some of the developed areas of the coast, projects that are presented to the Coastal Commission that they unilaterally deny, for whatever reason, and the project is replacing an older development with new development, with parks and with greater access for the public to the coast, and the Coastal Commission, finds that, they deny that for whatever reason, various reasons they come up with. I think that the best control of that coastal asset is left up to the local control. And Mr. Stone, I specifically thank you for your service on the Coastal Commission for the 3 years that you're there, being good colleagues with Mr. Cox from San Diego, who's on the Coastal Commission now. I know that that's not an easy service in community service. So I do thank you for that, and I know it takes a lot of time and personal expense to do that. So thank you. And so with that, I do ask for your aye vote, and hopefully we'll continue the dialogue on this bill and other bills that we see dealing with the Coastal Commission.
Please call the roll.
The motion is due pass and re-refer to Judiciary Committee. Williams?
No.
Williams, no. Jones?
Aye.
Jones, aye. Christina Garcia? Gomez? Hadley? No. Hadley, no. Harper? Aye. Harper, aye. McCarty? Stone? No. Stone, no. Wood? No. Wood, no.
2-4, we will leave the roll open, and I will notice reconsideration.
But it has a chance.